Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a huge topic, something that has shaped all of human history, our sense of identity, specifically ethnic identity. So let's just jump right in with a big question, one that really gets to the core of who we are. Where does your identity come from? I mean, is it something you're just born with? Something that's always been there? Or is there more to the story? There are really two big ways to look at this. On one hand, you've got the natural view. This is the idea that your identity is just, well, it's in you. It's innate, timeless, based on these really deep emotional connections. But then there's this other kind of provocative idea. What if identity is actually a tool? Something that can be shaped, even constructed, by leaders for their own political goals. So that first view has a formal name. Scholars call it primordialism. It's this idea that our ethnic identity is a given. It comes from these non-rational, super deep attachments to things like your family, your language, religion, even where you were born. It's the stuff that feels like the very bedrock of who you are. Okay, that's one way to see it. But what if there's another force at play here? Because that's exactly what our source material for today's explainer suggests. It tells a very different and honestly a much more complex story. Right, so the source we're diving into today is from the work of political scientist Paul Brass, and he makes a really challenging argument. He says that these ethnic identities we feel so deeply, they're not just given. He argues they are actively constructed, mobilized, and shaped by political elites. Basically, what if the things that feel the most natural to us are actually built? Okay, so let's get into the how. How is identity actually built? Well, the key, according to this analysis, is all about the power of symbols. So the source lays out this kind of three-step process for how elites do this. First, they pick a cultural symbol that already means something to people, something potent. Step two, they attach a new political meaning to it. They kind of hijack it. And finally, they use that newly charged up symbol to mobilize the group, rally everyone together, and, crucially, create a clear boundary, a line between us and them. Now, to make this crystal clear, we're not just talking theory here. The source walks us through three incredible historical case studies, all centered on Hindu-Muslim relations in South Asia. And you'll see how this process plays out in the real world. All right, let's dive into our first case study. And it all starts with a cow. So here's the backdrop. In Hinduism, the cow is a sacred animal. Meanwhile, cow sacrifice is part of some Muslim festivals. Now, this cultural difference existed for a long time without causing major widespread conflict. But the analysis here shows how political elites seized on this one specific difference and amplified it, turning it from a cultural practice into a major political flashpoint. And this quote from Paul Brass really hits the nail on the head. He says the cow was a symbol that could be used by both Orthodox Hindus defending their religion and by secular elites in their own power struggles. See what's happening? It wasn't just about religion anymore. It became a political tool, a way to mobilize people and gain power. And there you have it. That's symbol manipulation in action. You take a symbol with deep cultural roots and you reshape it. You charge it up for a totally modern political fight. Okay, so what's really interesting is that this wasn't a one-off thing. The source shows us this exact same pattern playing out with two other really powerful symbols, law and language. All right, let's talk about law. Muslim personal law, also known as the Sharia, is a body of Islamic law that governs things like marriage, divorce, and inheritance. For many, it's a super important part of their religious identity. But it was also turned into a symbol, a really potent symbol of a separate and distinct Muslim identity in the political sphere. So check this out. When secular leaders started pushing for a uniform civil code, one law for everybody, some Muslim political elites framed it as a full-blown attack on their community's identity. It wasn't just a legal change anymore, it was an existential threat. And by positioning themselves as the defenders of the law, they also became the defenders, the protectors of the entire community. And the same thing happened with language. This one's wild. Originally, the spoken language between many Hindus and Muslims was pretty much the same, just different dialects. But then, elites on both sides started to intentionally pull them apart. They pushed for different scripts, Devanagari for Hindi, Persian Arabic for Urdu. They drew vocabulary from different places, Sanskrit for Hindi, Persian and Arabic for Urdu. They were actively creating difference where there was similarity. And again, this wasn't just some natural evolution of language. The source argues it was all about competition. Specifically, competition for things like government jobs and political power. If you create separate languages, you can create separate communities, and then you position yourself as the leader of that community. It's a strategy. Okay, so we've looked at the cow, the law, and language. Let's pull back. What's the big takeaway here? What does this all mean? And this is the really critical point from the source's argument. It's not saying that cultural differences aren't real. Of course they are. What it is saying is that their political power, that's something else. That power is often deliberately constructed. It's built. So, let's wrap this up. What have we seen? We've seen that identity can feel completely natural, but it can also be constructed. We've seen that elites play a huge role in shaping these identities for their own political reasons. And how do they do it? By picking and manipulating these incredibly powerful cultural symbols to draw those lines in the sand, to create a clear us and a clear them. And that brings us to the final question, the one I want to leave you with. If identity really is constructed this way, if this process is as powerful as it seems, what symbols are being used to shape our world today? What are the modern-day versions of the cow, the law, and the language that are being used right now to define who we are?